The Excellent Conversation, a podcast about teaching, learning, and anything else that pops into Wes and Amie's heads.
I am rolling, and I'm eating an Oreo. I am weirdly ready.
I'm totally going to include that in the edit. I'm totally going to add, like, keep the Oreo.
Right on.
I was just saying I had pistachios, and that's not me flexing my like healthier choices. I mean,
You kind of are flexing your healthier choices. No. I mean, I respect
my healthier choices.
Yeah. No, I respect that. I'm a big fan of almonds, but I wish I put my mouth where my mouth was more often.
Do you know what the secret for me in eating well is never buy the stuff that I Yeah, no. I mean, just don't have it. Don't have it. Because if I have it, I
Doesn't
eat
work
it.
for me.
You know
what happened to me? I didn't have anything like that in the store. So I went yesterday and I bought the Oreos and some ice cream and some other stuff like that.
Sure, of course. No, that's I hear what you're saying. What I'm saying is I actually am able to restrict myself from not buying that stuff because if I have it, I will eat it.
Keyword able. I'm just saying your willpower edges mine out in a way that's very significant.
Gosh, a lot of flexing by me today.
I'm just saying. I mean, what the heck? Got to build each other up.
The person, speaking of building each other up, the person with whom I'm chatting right now is Wes Carroll, who has a really awesome badge. And I need to sort my badge game out because that's cool.
I'm telling you, the badge game. That's what, I wonder if anyone's even watching this. Everyone's listening to it. No one's watching it. So for those of you listening along as you wash your dishes or whatever you do while you listen to podcasts, I have this little thing in the lower corner that has like my little logo from my website and it says who I am and all that kind of good stuff on my video. So I feel all official. I'm not going to wear a tie. So this is as formal as I get right here.
I would say ties are like a little bit out of vogue. You know what I mean? Like even
I sometimes wear a sweater though, like a collared sweater. That feels very academic and
That's cute. I mean, the thing I would say is like, when was the last time you saw a billionaire wearing a tie? You know what I mean? Like they don't really wear ties. They wear like nice shirts that are like really well fitted.
Oh, no, wait. See, I disagree. I think a West Coast billionaire, absolutely. A New York billionaire without a tie?
Oh, good point.
They bathe in ties. Come on. New York billionaires? Don't you think? I don't know.
I would not, if you offered me the chance to be a New York billionaire-ess or billionaire, I guess they're all just billionaires. I don't think I'd take it. I don't think I want to be a New York billionaire. I mean, it doesn't sound chill to me, and like I like chill.
No, it does not sound chill.
No, being a billionaire is stressful. It's not fun,
I feel like New York is one of those places where perversely you could just like hole up in your Batman style compound and just you may as well be on Mars or whatever. I don't know if that's really true.
In one of those splinter towers. Because they all the new real estate is being built in these like tiny little like half lot blocks or whatever, and they just go straight up, and they're like a splinter in the middle of the skyline, and you have this huge view of Central Park, and you just take the elevator straight to your apartment, and then like you potentially never leave. Yeah.
There is a part of me that finds that very appealing, even while there are other parts that recoil in terror.
Yeah, I don't know why that's exceptionally unappealing to me. I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah. Again, with the flex. I mean, I got to acknowledge that does sound like could be nice in some ways, even.
I'm flexing my lower class fantasies. Like that's not flex. You know what I mean? So like,
it's pretty sweet. I like it. So,
anyway, so you're Wes, but then you have to introduce me too.
Oh, right.
Because I don't even have a badge.
I'm so sorry. Yeah,
I don't even have a badge, Wes.
I'm not keeping track of the various things that we're throwing out on the conversational whatever. My conversational partner is Amie Dorsey, who has been okay. So professionally, right? You have a long history of helping students flex and more on the SAT and ACT. You have library isn't the right word. What's the word for the collection of books that you have written, that one has written?
Half a shelf.
Well, no. Yes, exactly. Like it's a 2-digit number for sure. But you don't have a history or is bibliography? Do you say that about an author?
I think you can say bibliography. Yeah, totally.
Your bibliography
canon, my
includes
canon.
canon. Yes, exactly. Fire away, but with one fewer N. Yeah, you've written a number of books, several of which are on my shelf as well. I think you're just a delightful writer, and
Thank you.
it's so nice to see writing that is so on point for the task, and at the same time is not dry. I mean, it's just non-boring
so
test
much.
prep since what, 2000?
Since 2000. Oh my God.
Yeah,
and I swear I might have started in 99. It's possible.
Yeah.
I can't remember the first date. It was right around the turn of the century and before the turn of the millennium, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Wes Carroll's on wescarroll.com, by the way, 2 R's, 2 L's. I have to get the website.
Thank you very much. Yes, Amy Dorsey can be found at tutorted.com. And these days, although you are continuing to do that, you're also a writer, and you are an artistic output. You are an artist.
I think I'm an artist. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. That's the word you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. God, it's such a difficult word, such a 50-cent word. And then I too am an artist, although in my case it's more along the direct musical lines, whereas I think yours tends more towards writing and is perhaps broader in general.
For better or worse.
For better or worse. You were talking with me. So the main event for today's conversation, I'm going to keep on the shelf for now, in order that we can talk a little bit about about the recent announcement that you brought up in the conversation before we started. The recent announcement.
I'm fired up. I'm
let's
pretty
see now.
unhappy.
So it's early February 2023 as we record this. Hopefully, our listeners are listening to it not too long after that. Why don't you intro this potentially contentious and certainly interesting topic?
Yeah, and you know, my thoughts are really, really simple. So the College Board last fall introduced a new course, AP African American Studies, and yesterday they neutered it. They removed from the curriculum, and it's just like, it's such a effing joke. Bell hooks, not in the curriculum. Ta-Nehisi Coates, not in the curriculum, not anymore. And I understand. Sorry. So the other piece of the news is that David Coleman, the CEO of College Board, said this was not a politically motivated decision. This was a curricular decision, that they had made a mistake and it wasn't the correct curriculum to teach or whatever. Whatever his nonsense bullshit was, okay. He claimed that it was the decision made on a curricular basis and not a political one. And obviously I call bullshit, you know, and I will say what I said in my comment on Instagram in response to the Them magazine post about it. David Coleman is a weasel and a coward. So these are my feelings.
You know, I was talking about this very thing earlier this morning over potentially too much coffee with a close friend and colleague of mine, and we came to the conclusion that I'm not sure that this is going to be any more complimentary, but we intended it as such. I think David Coleman is a very talented bureaucrat. You know, like I think like it makes sense that he would say what he said in the context that I think he views himself in. And God knows I could not run that organization a tenth as well as he has along many axes. But I still just, God, I really wish he would step up and own the fact that he has more influence, right, broadly, culturally, than we intend to give bureaucrats and bureaucracies. I mean, that's the position he's in.
Right.
You know, the SAT hasn't changed the world. And I call bullshit on that. The SAT has had what I would consider to be a profound effect over the decades on the shape of our culture because of the way that it shapes the maturation of our so-called best and brightest, and who in many cases are in fact our best, not all cases, but certainly in many cases are in fact our best and brightest. And so, again, I'm not saying I could do better, but it bums me out that he's kind of just doing his thing and staying in his lane and trying, you know, it's like, if ever there were a time, right?
I appreciate what you say, that he is a like monumentally good bureaucrat. You know what I mean? Like, and you have to be, and there are like, there are people to please in that role. And also like, you are in a position of influence, and to me, it's like there are certain jobs and roles where like the bureaucracy is inescapable. When you're educating the children, you also have a responsibility. You know what I mean? Like to me, there's a seriousness and an importance to that particular role. And so like being a bureaucrat isn't enough for me, you know? And I also, like I said, I mean, the words I use, I'm going to say them again because I want to say them again: weasel, coward. And let me just say what I mean by that, like especially like the weasel thing. Like when you use some explanation that is not the truth to justify your actions, that makes you a weasel, you know? And I understand that that is in part a bureaucratic maneuver, but that's what I can't get behind with this particular person in this particular role. So
speaking the truth is made more complicated in an age where we can no longer agree on what truth even means.
Right.
Right.
And that's fair. I get what you're saying, and I get it. I'm right, but I get it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair position to take. You're right, and you get it, and yeah.
I know, and it's like I shouldn't even dabble in this stuff, and like I think our audience is probably small enough where like it's not going to get me into any trouble. You know what I mean? But like. But if it were bigger, it would, you know, it could, it could and would. And that's like, you know, I'm not taking that big of a risk, but I'm taking a little bit of a risk, you know?
Well, so let me at once shine a spotlight and elevate what you've said in a way that's going to sound like I'm pushing back a little bit.
That's fine.
What you just said is, look, this could get me in trouble if the audience were bigger, but it's the right thing to say. To which my response is, if it's the right thing to say, it's the right thing to say no matter the size of the audience, because that's the very thing you're objecting to in Coleman.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a good point. We gotta step up. I mean, honestly.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's you know, it's hard. Like, for so many years, I was like, God, why are we all just playing activists? That makes no sense to me. But I've since come around to the idea, oh God, what is that great quote? Our greatest fear is not that we're powerless. Our greatest fear is that we actually wield power. You know, because if we actually wield power, then we have to be thoughtful about how we employ it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm not the president. You know, I don't run college board. There's a bunch of kinds of power I don't wield, but that doesn't make me powerless. You know, I'm in a position of influence to some people in some ways. So, you know, be responsible with it. And if that means, you know, I understand why he said what he said. I understand that it's good for his organization. But at the same time, yeah, I'm with you. It's like you are causing damage broadly by saying that thing, you know? And he may well know that in his heart of hearts. I don't know. But yeah, stepping up is a good idea. And I'm going to take this as an opportunity to say, okay, there's an example of not stepping up. I'm sure there are examples of me not stepping up, and I'm going to try and turn those around. I think that's worth it. And as educators, it's like it's not virtue signaling. It's like, no, it's my job to set an example. So like, set the example. That
is kind of like I think that my deeper point that I've realized as I was kind of vocalizing this, that like I just think educators have a special role, you know, and I don't think that he's I don't approve of the way he's taking on that role. You know, I don't think he's seeing the world through like an enlightened educator's eyes. You know, so
yeah, I think that makes sense.
Our real topic.
Our real topic.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, I'm excited. I'm equal parts excited and terrified.
So first of all, let's make up a few. Let's make up a few different topics, all of which are fake, before we get to the real one. Today we're talking about the space. Let's see, the Voyager mission. No, today we're talking about. I can't even think of a good fake one. Can you think of a good fake one?
Oh gosh, not off the top of my head. No, it's
the
like
role of AirPods in music consumption. All right, that's fine. All right,
yeah,
so
yeah,
on to
yeah,
the real thing. That was
yeah.
I'm being silly.
No, I mean, I'm going to put this all up in the title of this episode too, because I just
long title,
but not all of it. This will be an interesting moment too, because I do think this is an interesting moment in time and history. So ChatGPT, which has been released to the public. Now, it's been around because all the data that ChatGPT is sort of aggregating dates to up to 2021. It'll continue to like take in, more data, but the kind of like language skill that we can count on it for dates through 2021. So it's been around, it's been in development, obviously. It will continue to be in development and the engines will continue to grow, but it's been made public probably about a month ago, I think. Maybe it was in December of 2022, but, and people are seeing the pretty impressive power of it. I've got one funny example. So random. I was like looking to go on a date in Las Vegas. And I was like, what are some good like first dates? And what's funny is I did this sort of like after the fact. I went on a date. And then after the fact, I was like, what are great, first date ideas in Las Vegas? And like one of the ones that it suggested was the thing that I did. So I emailed the guy I went on the date with, and I was just like, well, ChatGPT would have done the same thing, would have taken us on this particular date. So it's pretty funny. Anyway, you can ask it for dating advice. You can ask it to write a sonnet. You can ask it to write an instruction manual. You can ask it for therapy. You can have it write song lyrics. It can do
You can
whatever
have it
you
write
want it to
code
do.
that will execute.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah. Please write me some Perl code that will input, that will take in on standard in, the contents of a file that's formatted in this way and will output blah, 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 blah.
I love that I'm thinking of like how it can write poetry and you're thinking of how it can write functional code. Yours is so much more useful than mine.
Maybe. I mean, it comes back to our training, right? Like, I mean, you have training as a writer, I have training as a coder. That's one of the many different bits of training we each have. But the interesting part is like when we really want to test whether a computer can do something interesting, we go in a couple different places. We used to go to what are the traditionally hard thinky things like playing chess. We don't do that anymore, obviously. So because it
kicks our ass at chess,
Yeah, although one thing that's really interesting is that hybrid teams still beat computers. Like human-computer pairs still do better than computer. At last I checked anyway, which is
that's fascinating.
Yeah,
that's good news. That's good news. We might survive.
Well, yeah, for a little while anyway. But and I think that's going to come up in our discussion later too. But and I think that's a pretty common theme. But I mean, in some sense, right? Me and my phone, right, do better in navigating life than I do alone. I mean, certainly my phone can't navigate my life, but like, the human computer pair does better than the human in that context, right?
And better than the computer. That's fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Because we each have different strengths, right? But now when we want to gauge how good a computer is, we go to two places. All right. How does it do fuzzy human things? And how does it do something I'm good at, whoever I am? Right. So I naturally go to, coding, I can't do that. And it's like, well, yeah, I can. And writing is something for you. And you kind of had a twofer in that writing a sonnet is both writing and it's something that we think of as intrinsically human. It's like, well, no, it turns out reading the sonnet is part of the experience. And so a human is always in that loop in that sense.
That'd be interesting. Maybe if the loop is open, because I haven't actually had it write a sonnet that could be a fun like capper today. You know what I mean? If we wanted to, like once we get through our conversation, just to like see, as long as the engine isn't busy, because sometimes the engine is too busy to be used. But
I think haiku might be a more interesting challenge because
it's too easy.
The thing with
it's too easy. Haiku.
No, I would disagree. The problem with the sonnet is like it rhymes and then it seems like it's at least C+ work. Whereas with haiku, right? Like shitty haikus are a dime a dozen. Really well-written haikus are hard because you only have 17 syllables to actually say something in a way that doesn't... Honestly, the problem with bad haiku is that it all reads like it was written by a computer.
That's funny. Yeah, we'll try haiku. I like that. You know, by the way, pet peeve of mine, when people say like, I wrote a haiku and they don't write it 575. You know what I mean?
It's like, 868 is okay too, right?
I always thought it was 575.
Well, 575 is what I always heard too, but I don't know. I don't know if this is a legit thing, but I remember someone once telling me that 686 was considered to be okay too. Although now that I think about it, there are certain Japanese syllables that could be voiced or unvoiced. I'm totally treading into water I don't understand here, but maybe there's a thing about that. I don't know.
Well, we're in over our depth, which was...
Yeah, for sure. Out of our depth. Wasn't that like the runner-up to the name of
podcast?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's great.
Which we still need to do that. It's so funny.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I'm gonna table that for now. We have real quick. We have another idea.
Table that for now. That's what we should call a podcast because that's all we ever do. All right, that's a great idea. Table that for now. Let's get on to the other thing. All right, so ChatGPT.
Okay, so back to ChatGPT. Okay, so
all right, so let's prove that we are out of job because ChatGPT can do a better job of it than we can.
Okay, so here's what we did. As a starting point for today's episode, Wes and I each wrote a prompt for ourselves and for the ChatGPT engine. And what we're going to do is start by sharing the question and then the responses. And I kept the responses to 100 words max.
Yep.
I've seen Wes's response and I generated the ChatGPT response, so I know which one's which. Just for funsies, though, you have not seen my response and the ChatGPT's response to my prompt.
Right.
So if you don't mind, I would love for you to read the prompt and the two responses out loud.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so take it away.
Here we go. So the prompt reads, to what genre does Shakespeare's play The Tempest belong? Explore the complexity of its placement beyond the simple categories of comedy, tragedy, and history in 100 words. Whew. All right. Here we go. Response number 1. Comedies end in marriage, tragedies end in death, and histories star an English king. The Tempest, featuring both murder, plots, and a marriage, defies these traditional rules. Some scholars call the play a tragicomedy, but that label, convenient though it is, does not reflect the complexity of the dramatic action or the mystical tone of the play. Perhaps a fourth category, romance, is more appropriate here, as it leaves room for the magic, love, and strangeness that lie within this late Shakespeare work. All right, I'll read the question again, the prompt. To what genre does Shakespeare's play The Tempest belong? Explore the complexity of its placement beyond the simple categories of comedy, tragedy, and history in 100 words. Second response. The Tempest is a difficult play to categorize as it contains elements of comedy, tragedy, and history, making it a unique combination of genres. It's often considered a romance with its themes of love and forgiveness, but it also has elements of tragedy in the depiction of the fall of a powerful ruler and the consequences of his actions. The play's complex characters and themes also suggest elements of history as the play explores the social and political issues of the time. Ultimately, The Tempest transcends simple categories and offers a unique, multi-layered exploration of human relationships, power, and the consequences of action. Whew. So let's see what I got here. So the first one, I was like, well, the first one is clearly the ChatGPT response, because histories star an English king. Like, that's just plain factually false. So that sounds like something that an algorithm would generate. Let's see here. Defies these traditional rules. Sounds like they're restating the question. Does not reflect the kind of mystical tone of the play. That's interesting. A fourth category, as it leaves room for the magic, love, and strangeness that lie within this late Shakespeare work. The history star and English king thing really was the thing that got me sort of biased towards thinking. And then for the second one, The Tempest is a difficult play to categorize. It's like, oh, that sounds like like they're really trying to tie it back to the question. Unique combination of and they both used unique, and I'm like, I don't know if I buy that. Romance with elements of tragedy, plays complex characters, elements of history, transcends, offers a unique multi-layered exploration of human relationships, power, and the consequences. I'm going to say the second one is yours, and the first one is ChatGPT.
You are wrong.
Oh, son of a gun! How about that?
You're wrong. Yeah, it's interesting. So, and it's funny because the line that you were focused on in the first one is a line I was thinking about, the English King one, because I was the histories like I love Shakespeare, love, except for the histories. They've just never been like my jam. The Henrys are pretty fun. 1 Henry IV, Henry V, they're both like they're pretty cool
you mean
plays.
Shakespearean histories? Oh,
Exactly.
Yeah,
And so I'm missing that word. I'm missing that word. And that's why I think that and interestingly, because it's missing that word, that's actually a clue that I wrote it and not the computer, because the thing that the computer did is hit the nail on the head, right? The Tempest is a difficult play to categorize. It's like, that is so on the button. You know what I mean? Now, it was one of the things that I liked least about that one. So it's interesting that you should say that, right? Yeah, exactly. I know, and because it's not charming, you know what I mean. That's not like it's not. It's on the nose and it answers the question, and it's not appealing, really. I think if I added the word, if I threw in
Shakespearean comedies.
It's very like stressful to type
comedies
on camera. Shakespearean comedies. Why is there a return there? Shakespearean comedies end in marriage. Exactly. His tragedies and death, and his histories star an English king. And so the English king thing, I wrote this last night, and I not ad-libbed. I was looking at the list. There's one play, Sir Thomas More, I think it is, that I've never read, and I've never heard of anyone reading, honestly. I mean, and I'd be curious to read it. Besides that one play, every single other Shakespearean history is named after an English king. And so I was kind of making this
now
like cutesy
it's Rye. Like now I see the raised eyebrow in it, right? But I didn't see it the first time.
I like that word, by the way, wryness. Like I wonder if even with a prompt, the computer would be able to be wry. Wry is like a very, very specifically human trait, because it's within the category of humor. It's within sarcasm. It's then like dry humor plus sarcasm plus intelligent insight. You know what I mean? There's it really goes into like a very, very, very fine point. And I wonder if the computer could do wry, if prompted to do wry. I don't know.
I would bet on yes, just because it's trained on a corpus of human writing.
Yeah.
Much of which has been identified as wry. And we're pattern matching machines. We read into something what we expect to read into something. So I bet it could do it.
Here's a metaphor I just thought of. Suppose you're thinking of human knowledge and the expression of human knowledge as a river, okay?
All right.
When you're in the wide part of the river, when you're in the Mississippi, and the answer to your question lies within this river, okay? Like, the wider the river is at that time, at that moment when you're trying to answer the question, the closer and the better ChatGPT is going to be to approximating that and like landing in the right spot, basically, saying the river's right about here. You know what I mean? Like the answer's right about here. The narrower it gets and the deeper you get and the more sort of like you get into sort of channels and creeks and capillaries, you know what I mean? Capillaries obviously is a slightly different metaphor, but it's the same physical principle. The water, the liquid has now spread out and is into these finer channels. I think the harder it is for the computer to nail it because it's more specific. Does that make sense?
It does, but I disagree. Well, do I disagree?
I
think I have a different focus. Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I think your frame is the human way is perfect, and can ChatGPT do it the human way? And I think the different take on it I would have is, if we're talking about these broad topics, these broad rivers and the streams and so forth, there is a characteristically human way of distilling truth out of this. And some humans are better at it than others. That's why we have philosophers. It's why we have the concept of wisdom, right? And I think, I don't even want to say algorithms, but machines like ChatGPT are already revealing themselves to have a characteristic way of doing it. And again, I come back to the human-computer teams, right? It's like the reason that extremely powerful people tend to have, advisory boards or cabinets or whatever, is that it's helpful to have people with different points of view, with different points of expertise and so on. Certainly, I would want to have that point of view represented in an advisory board in certain contexts, maybe many contexts. And I'm okay with the idea that it does it differently from humans. That can be part of that's part of the value of having a hybrid team in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that we probably are going to land on that hybrid answer. And in fact, there's a little bit of that here. And let me explain.
Sure.
So two things. One is I wrote my response, and then what did I add back in? I added, after I let ChatGPT give me a couple of different responses, and I picked the one that I thought was like the better response. I then edited my response a little bit, just a little bit. I added the word love here. What was the other thing I added? There's one more thing I added. Oh, the complexity of the dramatic action. I added of the dramatic action. Because it got some things that I didn't get. It was more sort of like comprehensive. And so you said a minute ago that the human way is like the perfect way. And really, what I would say is the human way is the human way. When it comes, and when it comes to assessing Shakespeare, because of tradition, because of 400 plus years now of response to Shakespeare, like the human response is the response. We had not, and we had not anticipated AI responding to prompts about Shakespeare when I was in college, not that long ago. So I don't know. I think it's go ahead.
Let me wind back and point out that you've spoiled the experiment. The two answers you've given me are not human versus computer. They're hybrid against hybrid. You just said you picked the response from ChatGPT that you thought was best. That's a hybrid answer. You put a finger on the scale, and you edited your own answer in response to some things the computer, that's my point, right? My buddy Dan Thron, oh my God, such an interesting guy. Great thinker. He's LA director, actually. And
cool.
One of the points that he makes, one of the points he makes about stable diffusion, which is kind of the visual art version of ChatGPT, right? You tell it, draw me a blah, blah, blah in thus and such style, and it'll do it, right? And one of his points is, and I didn't even believe him at first, but he was way ahead of me on this one, and he's right, I think. He pointed out that, okay, if I tell Stable Diffusion to make some piece of art, and it makes the art, well, who's the artist? And I'm like, well, Stable Diffusion's the artist. He's like, what about all the people who made the art that the corpus was trained on? And I was like, oh yeah, right, they're the artist. He's like, you got it wrong both times. I'm the one who decides when it's done, so I'm the artist. Because art is curation. Art is, this is the one that is good. That's art. Okay, and I think in the same way, when you say of these various responses, this is the one that is rightest, right? It's not really just a thumb on the scale. It's an important part of the process,
I totally agree. And I think I'm going to flip to the second response, because this morning I added another response because you and I had a conversation speculating about how this was going to go down, like how you might be able to make the decision which one was mine and which one was ChatGPT's. And one of the...
Which I clearly blew. Go on.
You did, but I think you weren't looking for that particular thing, because the thing we were speculating about was grammar. I do think that, because the Shakespearean thing, that's grammar, but that's really like content. That's really, that was like just a content error.
Totally.
Or just an omission on my part. But grammatically, the structure of this sentence in particular, and you mentioned the defies earlier, that's me not flexing on grammar, but like using grammar because I know how to do it, and having a little bit of like fun, and I don't know if the computer. I wanted to see if the computer could do the same thing, and I'm going to show you, because if you know me, by the way, and this is actually a dead giveaway. If you
the M dashes, I got it. I
love M dashes.
So let me read the two sentences, right, for those who don't have the screen share. So your final sentence is this: perhaps a fourth category, romance, is more appropriate here, as it leaves room for the magic, love, and strangeness that lie within this late Shakespeare work. Okay, I think that's lovely. Let's contrast it with ChatGPT's. Ultimately, The Tempest transcends simple categories and offers a unique, multi-layered exploration of human relationships, power, and the consequences of action. Like, except for consequences of action, which I thought was really nice, that reads a little bit, I'm going to exaggerate here to make the point, it reads a little bit like a bullshit sophomore English class closing sentence.
No doubt.
Right? It's just dry. And if I hadn't been so blinded by my preconceptions around history's star and English king, I think I might have been more receptive to that nuance.
Yeah. I tried to, I gave it a slightly different prompt, okay? And I said, to what genre does Shakespeare's play The Tempest belong? Explore the complexity of its placement beyond the simple categories of comedy, tragedy, and history in 100 words, using unusual but proper grammar. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just to see. Okay. So let's hear how it went. Why don't you read this one? Because I'll read your essays after this.
Happy to. The Tempest can be seen as belonging to several genres, not just comedy, tragedy, or history. It incorporates elements of both comedy and tragedy, with its resolution having comedic undertones, but also addressing deeper themes of power, colonization, and revenge, which have a tragic aspect. The play also has elements of a romance, with the development of a relationship between the characters Ferdinand and Miranda. The use of magic and the depiction of an imagined island further adds to its fantastical and imaginative nature. Thus, The Tempest can be considered a genre-defying work that blends elements of multiple genres. Yeah, that final sentence has the same problem, but I gotta say, that's closer, don't you think?
I think it's closer. I think to me, the changes to the grammar make it more awkward, not more elegant. I didn't say, I didn't say and elegant grammar, which is interesting. But like, I don't love. It incorporates. I mean, that's fine. It's just not strong. With its resolution having comedic and having to has this like I don't know, like a passivity to it. It's not active.
One of the things that I love about this, I'm sorry to cut you off right in the middle, but one of the things I love about the thing you're in the middle of doing right now is that it illustrates so well how analyzing ChatGPT's choices here, such as they are, is so enlightening for the purpose of better understanding the choices we ourselves make as writers. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to analyze your own work, but how useful it is to have a writing partner in ChatGPT who can write stuff for you, some of which is good and some of which is bad, which you can then pick apart for the purpose of becoming a better writer yourself.
It'd be an interesting prompt would be to take your own piece of writing and feed the entire thing right back into the engine and say, rewrite this. I've seen
results that say, okay, having done that, like, to what genres should give it the prompt, then provide a 100-word critique of the answer from the perspective of a college writing professor or whatever. Geez. And it can do that too, right?
Of course it can. I mean, honestly, what's interesting, Wes, actually, I think one of the limitations of ChatGPT is our inability to imagine everything it can do. And I know that together, as a collective, we're going to come up with some really cool possibilities. But it's funny because like I have my mind blown on a regular basis by ideas of like, wouldn't it be cool if, we tried this? And I don't know, the possibilities are just mind blowing. The idea, by the way, oh gosh. Okay. So let's talk about English for a second before we get to your topic. And I'm going to hide my, this so we can just see each other.
Hide your screen. Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. One of the questions I have, and like one of the big questions I think we have to answer is, how does this affect the teaching of English, right? And should it affect that? And how should teachers adapt and adjust? And what's funny, and the reason I thought about this just now is teachers are sort of like, yes, okay, so ChatGPT definitely came out in December because teachers were concerned about students submitting their final exams before the winter holidays via ChatGPT, using ChatGPT. Anyway, the funny thing that teachers didn't realize is that they can write their comments using ChatGPT too. Basically they can feed their students' essays back into the engine and have it write the feedback. It's like, two can play at this game.
But that assumes you can tell the difference, which, maybe teachers will become very quickly adept at that in a way that I've just demonstrated I am not, at least. I'm not.
No, exactly. Well, I mean, that's yeah, totally. That's part of the conversation here,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Let's save the implication question for now. Let's do your essays, and then we have like
go
ahead.
Quick implication. I just want to drop into the conversation the idea that teaching writing in an age of ChatGPT has a direct analogy to teaching math in an age where calculators become common.
I think that's true. I think let me. Can I respond to that now, or should we save it?
No, please do. What the heck?
Here's what I would say is a difference. ChatGPT is never going to make a grammatical mistake. Students using a calculator are going to forget the end of the parentheses or the beginning of the parentheses. And maybe there's a parallel example between like writing an essay about Shakespeare where a student, misses something or misses elements of the question, but ChatGPT is never going to make a grammatical mistake, which is changing the level of the student, you know what I mean? Enabling the student to work at a level that they probably are not inherently capable of on their own.
I believe I understand what you're saying, and if I do, I disagree. Because grammar is not the only component of good writing, as we've just demonstrated with our teardown of some of its responses.
Fair.
Right?
That's a good point.
In the same way, a student with a calculator is never going to make a certain class of mistakes. It doesn't mean they're not going to make mistakes. It just means they're going to be immune to that particular kind of mistake. And in the same way, grammar mistakes aren't the way you're going to catch a student using ChatGPT.
That's a good point.
As you pointed out, right? You pointed out some things in ChatGPT's response that I was not seeing. I mean, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, yeah, she's right. But it didn't pop off the page at me because that's not a thing I'm accustomed to doing in the way that, a professional writer or writing teacher is.
It kind of reminds me of automobiles and how they've become much more computerized, obviously. And in some cases, they just are computers,
computers on wheels, sure.
My perspective on writing is that of the person who was rebuilding engines in their garage, and knew what, a carburetor should look like. I'm making this up because I don't really know.
Because you don't know what a carburetor looks like.
But grammar is the carburetor. Grammar is the pistons. You know what I mean? Grammar is the intake and all that stuff because it's the mechanics. It's very literally the mechanics. And once you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore, the people who used to be specialists in the mechanics are like, hey, hold up. You know what I mean? We're all missing something really important here. And whether that's important or not, that ship has kind of sailed, and you can be kind of a hobbyist rather than a, rather than like a professional. You know what I mean? Yeah. Can we? I love the grammar thing. I love the grammar idea, and just like the idea that mechanics, like the question of how important are mechanics? Maybe they're not important at all. Maybe they're interesting and kind of like hobbyistic. Yeah.
I've got an analogy for you.
Yay.
So it's not that grammar is unimportant. It's that it's no longer a sticking point. It's no longer a place where you put inordinate attention because you can take for granted it will always be right. And to me, this is directly analogous to what they called in the old days penmanship.
Ooh, that is so good. That's so good, Wes. That's
right?
so fun. Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
Your writing needs to be legible and no one cares beyond that because if it's important, it's going to be typed. Right? So we don't spend a lot of time on it anymore. Once it's legible, it's good enough. And the tool will take care of it beyond that.
I've told this story before, and I'll keep it short. When I was in first grade, I had a computer. My mom bought an Apple IIe, and I knew how to use Apple. I think it was called AppleWorks. I think that was our word processing software.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Side note, did you ever play Wizardry, Apple IIe?
I don't think I had that game. I had a lot of games, but I don't think I had Wizardry.
Okay, all right. Apple.
Was it
Was
it one of those 2-word response games, or no?
No, it was like one of those. It was you're walking through the dungeon. You actually see like this really, crude version of and there's maps and you got to walk through it. And it felt very immersive at the time because you hadn't seen anything like it ever before.
And also, the human mind. Then the human mind is very great. Is prone to and excited for immersion at whatever level. Right. You know what I mean? Like the technology gets better, but the mind is doing a lot of the work.
There's a reason that cartoons are entertaining. Like, what the heck is that? It's like it's people. It's talking animals. It's whatever it's a cartoon of.
And it works. It's like Scooby-Doo is a dog. Scooby-Doo is a talking dog.
Right, exactly.
And no one's bothered to stop and ask, be like,
right.
Does this make sense?
What? Why is there a talking dog? Yeah, no. It's like, no, Scooby-Doo.
Up until just now, I've never stopped to ask that question.
So in first grade, Apple IIe, AppleWorks.
Yeah. So we were learning handwriting, and my fine motor skills have never been exceptional. In fact, they've never been very good at all. And I made the decision because I was a very I was a thinker at a very early age, and I was like, I made a conscious decision. I was like, I don't really need to get good at this because I'm not going to need this because I have AppleWorks, So you know what I mean?
Gosh,
so that little 7-year-old was anticipating like the use of technology. And there are times still when I need to make a handwritten note. And right now I write in all capital letters because that's the best, prettiest version I can do. My cursive sucks. My printing is not very much better. My signature sucks, and I don't need to use it very often,
Right.
Right now I sign my new signature as Amy and a little smiley face next to it. And like, that's, it works and it's fine, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
So, so like basically my point is we do leave skills behind when we don't need them anymore,
Right. Exactly.
Let's go to your prompts. Let's go to your prompt and your essays here. And it's interesting. I'm using the word your, which is funny because like, I'm thinking of both of them as yours. Okay, here we go. So, and I'm gonna not. The audience doesn't know which one's which. I know which one's which. I'll just read them both first, and then we can talk. Okay, so the prompt was: what is the best way to prepare for the AMC American Mathematics Competition? Is that right, Wes?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. AMC.
The AMC 12 exam. I have about 100 hours available over 6 months. What should I do? Answer in 100 words. I threw in the 100 words just to keep it tidy. Okay.
I think response. That's good. Do you mind reading them out of order?
No, that's fine. So I'm going to read response number 2 first, the second one on the page here. It says, to prepare for the AMC 12 exam, The best approach would be to create a structured study plan that utilizes your available time effectively. Here are some steps you can follow. Can you hear that sound, by the way?
What sound?
Wes?
I heard
the sound
something,
of
but
footsteps on the roof. Can you hear that? I wonder.
I heard a thing. I didn't know what it was.
I'm gonna work through the noise. It's gonna be. We'll see how bad it gets, but
I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be fine. I wouldn't worry
okay,
about
cool.
it.
I'm gonna jump back to prepare
Yeah.
for the AMC 12 exam. Sorry, one more time. Whatever. We know this. There's 2 edits in here so far. It's fine. To prepare for the AMC 12 exam, the best approach would be to create a structured study plan that utilizes your available time effectively. Here are some steps you can follow. 1. Familiarize yourself with the format and content of the AMC 12 exam by reviewing past exams and the official AMC 12 guidelines. 2. Make a study schedule and stick to it, dedicating a certain amount of time each week to math practice and review. 3. Utilize AMC 12 study materials, such as textbooks, practice problems, and online resources. 4. Seek help from a teacher or tutor if you have difficulty with specific topics. 5. Consistently practice and take mock exams to gauge your progress and identify areas for improvement. 6. Stay motivated and keep a positive attitude towards the exam. With consistent effort and dedication, you'll be well prepared for the AMC 12 exam. Fascinating. Just fascinating. Okay, response number 1. First, take a practice test cold in order to figure out where you are losing most points. Math knowledge, calm under pressure, getting started, reading accurately, pacing, something else entirely. Most people assume that they most need math knowledge, but that's not always true. The more honestly you can answer this question, the better your final results. So take your time here. Whatever your answer, there are best practices for improving in that area. Then redo this evaluation every 10 to 20 hours. Call me at any point for help. What are your thoughts?
I think that this ties back for me to a recent discussion about the idea of overthinking. This is going to be a little bit of a journey I'm going to take you on here, so just kind of bear with me. I'm going to try and build something up. So it always bothers me when a student says, "Oh, I overthought that one," because the implication is that there is such a thing as too much thinking, and I reject that notion. Right? I mean, it is certainly possible to think beyond a useful point and thereby waste energy, but it's not like there comes a point at which additional thought, makes the situation worse. Like, that's not how thoughtfulness is. Instead, I think that I'm overthinking it is really sort of semantic shorthand for I applied the wrong level of abstraction to the problem at hand, right? I'm trying to solve it on the tree level instead of the forest level, or vice versa, right? I'm getting caught up in this detail instead of seeing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And the reason I think that many people characterize that as overthinking is that they correctly perceive that their thoughts are not directed in an efficient direction. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. I like it. Yeah.
Okay, so the way I want to apply that to this is, I think that these two responses attack the question from a different level of abstraction. Mm-hmm. They're each hitting it from a different level of tree-ness versus forest-ness. So response 2, which you read first, is about the extremely valuable, so-called but not really commonsensical approach of, look, there are best practices around learning a thing. First and foremost, follow those. Don't get so caught up in the detail of some random, rabbit hole math exploration. Like, big picture, right? Familiarize yourself with the test, make a study schedule, use the materials, use the resources in terms of teachers and tutors, be consistent, stay motivated. That's good advice. Okay? I think of that advice as it's anodyne isn't quite the word. it lacks value because it's so obvious. But like,
Totally.
okay, sure. I mean, like, but I'm allowed to have that opinion, right? I live and breathe this stuff. What's obvious to me isn't obvious to all students who do it, and I forget that at my peril, right? Many students are going to be very well served by this advice because it contextualizes and systematizes a thing that these students need that they may not have. By contrast, I largely, in my response, right, response one, which you read second, I largely take for granted that they're going to be using best practices when I blithely say, whatever your answer, there are best practices for improving in that area. Right? It's like, now, granted, I'm not being entirely sort of insensitive to how difficult that advice may be to follow, because I somewhat self-servingly then say, call me at any point for help. Right? I'm clearly kind of steering the conversation to, you have to do this thing that I'm presenting as the easiest thing in the world that I know, in fact, is not so easy, and I'm here to help you with it.
Yeah,
so
I'm
obviously I'm much more interested in your feedback than my own evaluation, but I wanted to lead off just to kind of contextualize how I'm going to hear your evaluation of these two responses.
So my response is right in line with yours, and here's how here's my like additional sort of like thought on that. So the two responses, and this is true of my two responses, mine and ChatGPT's to the Shakespeare question, they cover a lot of the same ground, right? In different ways and with different levels of focus and different sort of like prioritizing different aspects. So there are two things that sort of inform that, and then two sort of like net effects of that. One is you have expertise, okay? And so your expertise allows you to propose the questions that you think a student might have, you know, the sort of like uncertainties that they may bring into their prep process in order to give them the faith that you may be able to help them address those questions, right? So like by asking those questions, you're actually establishing your expertise and credibility, okay?
Sure, yeah.
There's also style, and style I think is really, really interesting because it sounds cosmetic. It sounds purely aesthetic, but I think style is a tool for shaping that, again, establishes expertise. As a student, if I'm reading these two responses, I've seen the second one. I've seen the second one quite a bit, and that's probably a clue about how ChatGPT is deriving this answer, is that it's coming from texts that have been written. And those texts, the style is sort of like comprehensive, you know, and hitting all these points. You know what I'm saying? Like like the idea is basically give them the works. You know what I mean? Give it all to them. When you say there are best practices, you're basically saying like, once we talk, I can tell you which ones of these you really want to focus on. I'm looking at these six numbered points again, and I really didn't like them when I first read them, or I found them really like dry and like obvious. Yeah. Familiarize yourself with the format and content of the exam. I mean, duh, you know what I mean? Like obviously that's it, you know. But as a number one for me, it's a little bit unappealing because it's just so like ham-handed. You know, it's like, well, I mean, like
that's the word I was looking for earlier, ham-handed.
Right? You know what I mean? It's like it is the first thing you should do, and it's so freaking obvious that it doesn't feel like good advice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
the first thing you should do is learn to read so that you can read the questions on the exam. It's like that's just a flat out dumb answer, even though it's technically correct. Like that doesn't help anybody.
Exactly. I do like. There's one interesting thing that I noticed in their response. Point number 6, choosing to end with point number 6. stay motivated. Well, that's a little that's a little vague in terms of like how one would stay motivated, and keep a positive attitude towards the exam. Mm-hmm. With consistent effort and dedication, you'll be well prepared for the AMC 12 exam. I like that there's emotional communication happening there. It's not just like, this isn't just like nuts and bolts. It's also, you're going to benefit on this test from feeling good about your performance on the test. So I really like that.
When I first started answering this, the first thing I wrote was, first, congratulations on taking on this challenge. Cool. And I deleted that to get my response under 100 words.
Yeah. It's funny. I would love that. And we added to my essay, and let's polish yours up. And it's interesting why we're doing this. But first, congratulations. Yeah. What was the congratulations on? What was the rest of it? You can just freestyle it too.
Yeah, sure. Congratulations for taking on this challenge.
Yeah. Okay.
You're gonna learn some things here.
You don't get that many words. Sorry.
Yeah. Fair enough. Boom. Yeah,
how about
you're
this?
right.
And now we're really going to be collaborative.
Start by taking a practice test cold. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so that's emotional communication. It's emotional communication that the AI can learn, which is basically sandwich your constructive feedback with positive things, beginning and the end. Yeah, totally. And you have that too. Call me at any point for help. You know what I mean? It's like you have a lifeline. Yeah.
And I think it makes sense at the very end. You can also say, you've got this, but call me at any point for help or, whatever. Like if you really want to sandwich it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, we get back to something that we said earlier on, which is that the hybrid approach is really helpful. Like reading reading anyone's response to this question immediately engenders this sense of how it could be better. Like it surfaces ideas. Right? The imagination and creativity often, maybe even usually, works better with a scaffold of some kind. And that's why there's such this long-standing joke of, I'll do it in a minute. I'm busy right now. Someone on the internet said something wrong and I have to correct it. Right? Like we have this like built in like, I've got to fix that issue. I've said for a long time, I'm a terrible writer, but I'm a good enough editor that I can get away with calling myself a writer. Because my writing process is to first write something absolutely terrible, but then it's not a blank page anymore. And so I can get started. Right. And it took me forever to figure out that like, I have to like, it hardly even needs to be real writing. It just needs to not be a blank page. And, with stuff like ChatGPT, it's like, that's the first 4 draft. Like it's already grammatically correct. It's already on point. It's already structured correctly. And when I read it and I say, oh my gosh, you're missing this other thing. It's like, great. Now I'm doing the kinds of things I normally take 6 drafts to get to. And I'm doing it on the first crack through. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, writing is rewriting. That's like, there's only a few sage pieces of writing advice, and that's one of them. Yeah. Also, show, don't tell, basically. It's like, okay, go. Start writing. Yeah. Let's talk about what I think is we're already getting at the answer in some ways, but I think there's a specific noun that we need to introduce to the conversation, which is critical thinking.
Oh gosh.
Which is like a higher level. Basically, there's knowledge, there's comprehension, there's evaluation, there's synthesis, all this stuff, and the higher level ways of thinking are critical thinking. And we've when I was a student, we were taught to kind of value those things more than the lower level ones. I think it's really clear that the computer can handle the lower level ones. And in some ways, the things that it did on my essay, it did a better job than I did. It referenced the historical components of the Tempest, which I didn't remember, you know what I mean? And so like it covered that base. And I didn't. So as it's gotten better, and I think this is the reason that ChatGPT is interesting to us right now. I think it's starting to show some critical thinking. It's starting to show some style as well. And I think style is a higher level of thinking as well. You know what I mean? Like being able to deploy the information in a way that's got like a humanness and a communication within the presentation is higher level. But the big question is, and I think this is what teachers are asking too, will ChatGPT and AI engines make critical thinking irrelevant?
Well, I think that... Okay, so first of all, no, in the sense that if you don't have critical thinking, then you will lose your own agency in the world. And that's bad for you with a capital B. Okay? It may be that I no longer need some of the aspects of critical thinking, maybe even any of the aspects of critical thinking, to successfully generate an essay that's appropriate to my professional, standards for my career or whatever. Like that kind of critical thinking may become unimportant, in which case my job has certainly changed. Okay, that's one thing. But I'll put it as an extreme example. Without critical thinking, we believe everything we read. If you believe everything you read, you are in some trouble, Jack. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's the value. And, we all, so many of us right now live on one of the two poles of a very polarized political landscape in the U.S.
As I demonstrated at the beginning of our conversation,
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And this isn't about left versus right. This is about a thing that left and right have very strongly in common at this time, and probably will for a long time, which is that selection bias is very strongly filtering everything we take in. And algorithmically, obviously, there's a lot of reinforcement of that selection bias because there's a pre-filtering of what information even reaches us. But even if I had access to the full spectrum of views, available for consumption here in this country, I would reflexively reject about half of them because I have such a strong belief in the side that I identify with, right? And the fact is that critical thinking is in part the ability to listen to a view you disagree with and think about how it effectively undermines some of your own points of view. And I genuinely believe that this is a very strong contributing factor to the fact that most truly great thinkers tend not to be polarized. Like the really good thinkers tend to be centrist, not because centrist is the right point of view, a priori, but because too many of the arguments on both of the extremes of the political spectrum assume that the listener isn't really thinking about what's being said. Right? And sometimes on a good day, I'll read an article that I agree with and just be like, that's a weak argument. Like, yes, yeah. I feel some degree of dopamine reading this reinforcement of my view, but like, that's not what I want. I mean, on some lizard level, sure, yeah, it feels nice. But, from a reflective perspective, it's like, yeah, that doesn't serve me to be told I'm right. It's like bottom line, like there are 100 million people in this country who vehemently disagree with my point of view. Like they're all idiots? Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's not what's happening here, right? Like they have valid points.
I think you're modeling a really great way of living in the world in 2023 and beyond, and which is to like employ your critical mind. And one of the dangers, I think, of the AI engines and also AI, but also Google and computers, basically, is that I think it provides this new set of tools that allow people to work differently than they used to. And so I really think that word agency is like a fabulous word. And I think that is something we should all strive for. I happen to really value uniqueness of thought. And I've always found it fascinating that the hallmark of a successful English paper is that no one's ever written it before. You know what I mean? And even if it's your job to hit certain ideas that are in line with the ideas that the rest of your classmates hit, you can't use the same words they did. And if you did, you fail. You know what I mean? Like, you get in big trouble for it because you need to express it uniquely. Go ahead, Wes.
And that's part of why, even as a non-English, like I've never been a professional English teacher, right? I've never been a professional critic of writing, per se. And yet, like the most obvious critique I can come up with for a piece of writing is that it's cliche. I've read that before, maybe with slightly different words, but like that feels like a sophomore BS English paper to me. What I mean is that feels like a regurgitation instead of some aspect of original thought. Exactly what you were just saying. Yeah.
I have a very strange reference point here that could also get me into trouble. Could get me into more trouble than going after David Coleman.
Let's have it.
I have beef with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and let me tell you why.
Not where I thought you were going with this. All right. Tell me about the MCU.
No, I'm so sure. The MCU, yeah. I even have a problem with the acronym, actually, because the acronym becomes.
Walked right into that.
I do. Because the acronym becomes shorthand for a way of thinking that is not especially unique. Okay. Sort of like, I don't find those films especially brilliant. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that they're not like deployed with like so much skill and that there's so much kind of programming talent that goes
perhaps.
in. Craft,
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So much craft in service of a story that I don't find especially compelling at all. You're
saying that it systematizes and even industrializes a certain kind of storytelling that has been told before.
Okay. Right. And I don't even have especially a problem with that. What I have a problem with, okay, is the net effect, which is basically there is a very large audience, and I believe it's grown, and I believe it's grown in the Comic-Con era, of people who uncritically take in this culture, right, as sort of passive recipients rather than like active and critical recipients. They're not thinking about this. They're just watching this. You know what I mean? And I could be wrong.
In other words, this is the universe on its own terms, as opposed to this universe is implicitly placed in contrast to ours. It represents a critique of or a validation of certain aspects of our own. It's a commentary on our own universe. Is that the piece that you're?
Yes, and what I really want is I really want people to appreciate that it is. I want them to see the commentary. And I want them to add to the commentary, and I want them to disagree with the commentary. I don't want them to just accept it. Because I think that's the danger, is that we're going to become like sort of like kind of like slaves to this. You know what I mean? Like mental slaves, when we're not demonstrating that we have a unique perspective, and instead it's like we accept the gospel of the MCU.
I think it's the same, or at least it's closely related in my mind to the thing I was talking about earlier that I introduced with overthinking. The notion that there's sort of a level on which you want to analyze a particular thing. Some things you need to be at the tree level, some things you need to be at the forest level. When people say, let's look at this from 50,000 feet, right? I need a shift in perspective to see the features to see the important features of this thing in a way that makes sense. In fact, I'm making a judgment about which features are important. And I think part of what you're saying here is, in order to see the important features of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have to recognize it both as a statement of a fictional reality and a commentary on our reality. And the thing that makes me realize is that accepting it at face value with no critical thinking, right, is one end of an extreme. And the other end of the extreme, I would imagine, would be a doctoral thesis on all the different references in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which to me just sounds like it would take completely all the fun out of the whole thing and just like be an exercise in nightmarish boredom for me. Clearly, there's a middle ground that we both instinctively are trying to move towards, where we can appreciate it for the fun that it is. At the same time, we recognize some of the commentary and we have our own opinions about this sort of thing. And I think what you're pointing out is that if you view this stuff at either end of the extreme, right, then you're not engaging with it in the way that enriches us. You're instead kind of either going way off into this, this fictional reality that doesn't have anything to do with our lives, or you take all the fun out of it. And I feel like that same view helps us to understand so many of the things that are going wrong on the internet these days, right? Like, I used to read Reddit and get upset. And now, like, those same things, I read them on Reddit and it's like, oh, that's where you're coming from. Yeah, right. You're just kind of arguing for the sake of arguing. Like, you're having fun being a troll.
Yeah.
God bless you. I'm not going to get caught up in it anymore. Like, I can see that you're trolling the trolls or that you're just trying to get, whatever it is, right? But, at one time, I had a perspective that caused me to be shaken by that stuff. And now I have a perspective that allows me to be amused by it, right? And to be fair, like, I'm not talking about things that I think are genuinely threatening here. I'm talking about things that are only, upsetting in the mind of the reader, not actually, the tongue in cheek, for example, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I like that phrase though, taking all the fun out of it. That's a really interesting way of like describing the commentary of our commentary on like ChatGPT. You know what I mean? That like it does in some ways take the fun out of writing and expression, which is nice. Sometimes you don't need or want that fun. You know what I mean? Fun takes time.
They say humor explained is humor lost. Like part of what humor is telling a falsehood, right? The setup for a joke is not a true story, and that's part of the point of it, right?
My way of saying that was always the best jokes are the ones that like take the most explanation. Which is a joke in itself.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, I should have said, well, what do you mean by that, Amy? But I'm not quite that fast on my feet. So I wonder if what this discussion really drives home for me is that I think of ChatGPT as sand in the oyster, right? It's a little bit of friction and grit that causes us, not forces us, but causes us to make a pearl, right? To think about our own thinking, to improve our own thinking by viewing its flaws and viewing the thing that it does well and all that kind of good stuff in a way that people who are cross-coaching each other also do, right? It turns out you can do it all by yourself if you have a partner in ChatGPT. And I wonder, like, is that in the nature of ChatGPT? I doubt it. I think that's probably just in the nature of me and my own professional background. And like, I'm just inclined towards thinking, how does this make me a better writer? How does this make me a better thinker? What can I learn from this? That's really baked into my habit set. And I'm sure there are people who are going to take ChatGPT and already have and say, how can I use this to convince more people of my point of view so they will buy my widget or whatever it is that,
Yeah, that's what motivates people for sure. I would say my biggest takeaway today is, and this is something I've been thinking about separate from this conversation, is the value of teamwork and team members and different perspectives, because the best versions of the essays that we worked on today are the ones where the two of us and ChatGPT sort of did it together. You know what I mean? We ended up revising the ones that we had started with. So I think that like that was sort of we found our takeoff points to be a little bit more effective than ChatGPT's, but there were things we kind of pulled from their, you know what I mean, the inspiration we drew from ChatGPT. And if we made a bunch more queries, then I think we could probably get more useful input from the software. But the more different skills you apply, the better the end result, that to me is like, with some thoughtfulness, obviously, you know what I mean? Like you have to have some critical thinking applied, you know what I mean? You have to know what the task is and have like a plan to accomplish that goal. But if you're doing that by applying several different sets of resources that bring to the question different skills, you're going to do better, you're going to have a better result.
I think that makes sense. I'm reminded that they say that the functional IQ of a group is inversely proportional to its size. The notion that the bigger a group you have making a decision, the dumber the final decision. And I think that's just a result of when you get a bunch of people in the room and ego is involved, then sort of the cooperative path forward often involves watering things down. This is an opportunity to get multiple points of view in the room with only one ego.
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT doesn't mind. ChatGPT doesn't mind.
I was going to say,
parts of its whatever.
Who has the ego? You know what I mean? Have they built that into the system yet?
And so right now I'm just feeling like, this is a great way that I can have a 2 or 3-way discussion with 1 or 2 versions of a ChatGPT response and just cull out the parts that I think are most interesting, right? And I love the idea that you and I, of course, we have the background of working together, so it's relatively easy for us to riff on each other's strengths instead of water each other's ideas down, I think.
Right.
But I think that's really powerful. And I think it's really interesting that you pointed out that we each started with the prompts that we had written. I imagine it's just a short matter of time before we will find ourselves starting with what ChatGPT has written. Yeah. And then maybe the edits will become fewer and fewer. And, and that's the thing that we're all looking to with some straight up, trepidation all the way over into fear or panic.
Well, I think one other point that we haven't specifically named yet, but are, dancing around for sure is familiarity. So ChatGPT's part of its power is that it's got much more familiarity with the language and the use of the language than it had, than previous AI engines had. You know what I mean? It's just more comprehensive.
Sure.
You and I are very specifically familiar with one another and how we think. And so like, I kind of know in ways I'm not even conscious of what questions to ask you to get what, sort of like responses and then what is going to be specifically like useful about that. You know what I mean? Same thing for you with me,
Yeah, for sure.
You can.
I know if I dangle you off the edge of the conversational cliff, you'll give me something genius where most people would just clam up.
That's so good. Thank you. Yeah, that's funny. I was just looking. Okay, that's funny. Me and my tangents. I'm going to save that one. That you can train ChatGPT and you can give it familiarity with your own language. So there was a woman who trained ChatGPT using the journals that she wrote between age like 10 and 16. Okay.
And so then
when she fed everything that she wrote into the algorithm, and then she started asking, and then that turned into like a character, and then she would ask that character her younger self
What would my 12-year-old
questions.
self say to this in effect?
And she was asked, how did it do? And she said, better than I would have done. That ChatGPT was like writing better responses than she would have written herself. Which I think is really interesting. So like, whatever, we can get to fear mongering at some point down the road. Like, I'm not into that. And like, I just, the boat is on the water, the ship is sailing, you know what I mean? Like, let's see where it goes.
Yeah, put an oar in the water and let's just see where it goes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I don't want to go in that direction, but I do think that it's going to be interesting as it continues to build familiarity, what we see as a result of that.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out, right? I did, when I talk about fear and panic, I'm not saying we should all go running for the lifeboats. I'm saying we should be mindful that this is going to trigger us. And we should be mindful of the fact that it's not the first time technology has given us a thing that makes people upset. Like, that's the history of human culture. You
what
know,
was his name?
books.
Walter Ludd. Yeah, the dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Who went in.
Books are gonna ruin all of the. You know, it's like that's a thing, right? Yeah, totally. Good old Walt. Yeah. No. We're in it. Do the human thing. Make the best
will be the end
of
of
it.
us. You know, that's that.
Yes, exactly. Loom.
Yeah. The loom.
That reminds me of my
us.
favorite dad joke of all time. Favorite dad joke of all time. Those two are all over each other in that car. They're just weaving all over the road. You two get a loom.
Oh my God.
Weaving all over the get a loom. See how that?
No.
It's
No, I
horrible,
get
isn't
it.
it? Yeah, no, I know you get
Yeah.
it. Let me explain it some more though, because that'll help.
For those of you who are only listening, I can't see my face. You may be familiar with my favorite emoji, which is 2 eyes and a straight line across the mouth.
Yes, I heard you, and I see that you find it funny. Totally.
Exactly. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Thank you for assessing
Yep.
that emoji so carefully.
Yeah, no, I got it. The pun is the
other
second
person-
lowest form of humor. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I hate puns.
I know, but you hate my dad jokes even more.
The person with whom I've had this wonderful conversation is Wes Carroll, and you spell Wes's last name with 2 R's and 2 L's, and he's on the web at wescarroll.com, and he's so freaking smart. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like I'm kind of smart, and like there were moments during this conversation where it was like, oh, I really have to like work at this to like stay above water here. So yeah, he's Wes Carroll.
My lovely interlocutor, Amy Dorsey, I must call BS on that characterization, for it is I who am running on a treadmill trying desperately and failing to keep up with your fabulous mind. It's such a delight to talk with you, as it always is. Thank you for making the time and the energy to take us on this beautiful journey, which I will be thinking about for the rest of the day and beyond. And I hope you, dear listener, also will. Amy Dorsey can be found on the web at tutorted, tutorted.com, as well as probably in many other places I'm not even aware of, given the polymathic nature of your mind.
I'm such a polymath, yeah. I look forward to the next one, Wes. Let's talk soon.
Sounds good, Amy.
Thanks for hanging with us. Click subscribe, ring the bell, tell a friend, leave a comment. You know the drill.